Well, hello again. Contingent on You Listening podcast. My name is Steve Ploetz.
Whoa. What are you doing? This is my show today. Welcome to the Contingent on You Listening podcast, brought to you by Century 21 Affiliated. I'm Sam Bell, and I am here with our guest today, Steve Ploetz. Steve, what's it like in the guest seat?
I understand what Isaiah, the anxiety that goes into sitting. This is a hard seat.
Steve, we're excited to have you here. You've been in the business 18 years, 60 million in sales over the last several years. Fantastic career, top producer for Affiliated.
Yeah.
We are so excited to have you today.
Well, thank you. No, it's nice to be a guest. It's nice to be interviewed, and I appreciate you taking the time in order to do it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love talking with you. You're fun. You make it all easy. Okay, so let's talk about the market for a minute. I've been going around office to office, listening to people basically eulogize the market as if it has died.
Yeah.
I'm tired of listening to these funerals. Here's what I've noticed, though. People like you don't seem to be slowing down. In fact, if anything, you are forging ahead on track as if nothing's happened to the market. Has the market died? What's the deal?
So it's a great question, and I would say the market is changing all the time. And in 18 years, I've seen. I mean, my goodness, you've seen it as well. That the market is always different, and it's not any more challenging than any other market. Each market brings its own challenges. During COVID, when everything was selling hundreds of thousands over asking price, the challenges were dealing with buyers and trying to get their offers accepted, and them feeling discouraged and priced out and unable to actually buy something. And like, you dealt with that kind of challenge. Now the challenge that we face is interest rates are over 7%, and the uncertainty of now feeling like, well, now prices are high and interest rates are high and the payments are difficult. I think that there's a tendency for all of us to look back in the olden days, that it was so easy, that if you bought a house in 2015, that was like the perfect time to buy, and that it was so easy.
I bought the house I'm in 2015. It felt like a good time.
And it did feel like a good time, but I feel like, I don't know what your personal circumstances were, but likely you weren't planning on buying that house and flipping it.
No. And
I don't know if there were multiple offers, but when I purchased my house, also in, I got to think here, was it 2000? I think it was 2015. Yes. It had multiple offers in on it, and we paid over asking price, and we were the highest comp in the neighborhood.
This all sounds very familiar.
Exactly, and so I think that there's the perception that, like, well, looking back, if you bought in 2012 or 2015 or something like that, that it was obvious that the market was going to go up, when no, that's not the case. Yeah. Or there was no competition, and it was super easy, and you could negotiate down $100,000 off asking price. Also not true.
Yeah.
So the market that we're in right now is similar in that there are new challenges. Sure. And I think that as agents, the recognition that maybe what worked 2 years ago isn't working today. And I think that you have to have the ability to adjust. You have to embrace change.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's most critical. That said, like, diving into the nitty-gritty of our personal business, the vast majority of our business comes from people that we already have relationships with.
Okay.
Past clients. I mean, I can give you some exact numbers if you want to know them. I always keep like where our business is coming from on my phone, but 50 to 60% of our business comes from past clients and their referrals. And so if you're saying that in like last year we did 50 transactions, and the year before we did 80 transactions, if you're saying 50 to 60% of those, 50 to 60% of 80 is what, 40 to 48?
I'm not doing math on this.
I mean, we're saying 40 to 48 transactions in 2021 were people that we already had relationships with. Well, then we need to invest in those relationships. Yeah. And so what does that look like? That's client relationship parties, that's events, that's checking in with them, that's being authentic and kind of knowing where they're at. So
these people aren't just calling you. You're not just sitting here right now ignoring calls to talk to me because all of these agents all of these past relationships are just anxious to call you today to buy or sell. No. What are you doing to connect with them and find? So let me just give you an example. You know, you mentioned 2 years ago, I've heard people refer to real estate agents 2 years ago as order takers.
Right.
That I would show up and I would say, Steve, I want to buy a house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, I want a pool. And you would take my order and then fill my order. Nowadays, I feel like we need to be professional salespeople, which means we hunt and find.
Absolutely. And I would make the argument that 2 years ago you had to be a professional salesperson,
Ooh.
but there you didn't have to be as much.
Okay.
My opinion, if I'm a consumer, if I'm not a realtor, and all that I'm doing is I'm sending you a property on Zillow, and you're just opening that door for me, and then I say, I want to buy this house, I think I should write an offer at asking price, and you say, okay, sounds good, you're not providing a lot of value.
No,
So I think
that's
there's
what gives people bad names.
absolutely, and I think that there's two different sides to it. Number one is I need to have a real relationship with my past clients, stepping back into the agent role. And so a real relationship isn't a once a year touch. It isn't an email that I send. If I have a real relationship with you, I feel like those things can supplement the relationship that we have.
Yeah.
If I have a real relationship with you and you see stuff on social media, that's helpful and useful. And then on top of that, if you receive an email newsletter or an email that says happy birthday, that stuff is supplemental.
Yeah.
But if that's the basis of our relationship, then I would say we don't really have a relationship. So how do you build a
I think a lot of agents think as long as I'm active on Instagram or Facebook, I should be getting people calling me.
Why aren't people calling me?
It's weird.
And I would it's so odd that I'm not, in the same way that I would say think about it in terms of as an agent, think about it in terms of any other field, that if I needed to buy a battery or whatever, if I may know somebody on Instagram that sells batteries or anything else like that, if I need a service, a massage or like a chiropractor, whatever it is, just because I see them on social media, just because they send me a happy birthday email or they comment on my Facebook feed, have a spectacular day, that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to work with them.
That's true.
So the real question is, how do you build relationships with people, in my opinion? And
I agree.
And so how do you do that? That's got to be done face to face. Or that at least needs to be more than at minimum, it has to be a phone call, but much more than that, it has to be a meeting. And so what our team does, because the last few years, we have started to do more internet-based leads. It's still a very small percentage. I would say it's 10 to 15% of our business, but it's things like Yelp, it's things like HomeLight, it's things like Google Ads, it's things like Dave Ramsey and Ramsey Solutions, those kinds of opportunities. And so with every single one of them, what we are doing is we are pushing to meet the person to meet them in person. You come through whatever form, internet, et cetera, and you say, Steve, I'm not looking to buy for another 6 months to 12 months. We're pushing for, let's meet. Let's go to have a cup of coffee and let's talk about, let's build a plan, let's build a strategy. But really what we're doing is we're building a relationship with you. So then when we have a relationship, then things can come of it.
Yeah.
So I think that's where a lot of agents get it twisted, is they feel like, great, you told me you're ready 6 to 12 months. I'll reach out in 4 months because that's what I've been told.
I'll put you in the tickler.
I'll put you in the tickler.
Me.
Exactly. And when and you need to do a good job, I feel like, of scrubbing is one word, but like getting to their motivation and figuring that out. But I think everybody in the universe recognizes that buying real estate, particularly in Southern California, that's a good long-term plan.
Sure.
But the disconnect is from today to 6 to 12 months. How do I get there?
Yeah.
And so at least having an opening conversation of what does it look like? How can we plug in? And sometimes the things that we can do to help are introduce you to a credit repair person, introduce you to a lender so you can at least get an idea of those numbers. Maybe talk to a financial planner. The market right now is kind of all over the place. So all of that, I think, is really helpful.
I like that. So this conversation, let's role play it for just
perfect. I love to role play.
Minutes to show people what that looks
Juan,
like.
can I borrow my leopard print stuff? That's the kind of role.
Oh,
wait, it's different. Never mind. You mean real estate?
We're not going. It's not. It was a family show. So when you first meet someone, you're meeting me. Okay,
Yes.
You've got my name. You're trying to put a face and a name together.
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Are you a buyer or a seller?
I'm a seller. Listings, you list to last. So let's go with
Yes.
I'm a seller.
So, and are we meeting at your house?
Where would you prefer to meet?
I would definitely prefer to meet at your house.
Great.
So and a lot of this depends on the source of business.
Uh-huh.
So if you're referred by a past client, we're going to start there. Particularly, usually that's a phone call.
Yep.
Hey, I got your information from Joey. Joey says, et cetera, et cetera. I've known Joey. We're looking for commonalities.
Yep.
But all that I'm doing is I'm pushing for the appointment. Hey,
Okay.
here's what I would like. I know you said you're not interested in selling the house for another 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
What I wonder is, in order to actually get a real depiction of the value, at least today, it allows me to walk through the house.
Okay.
There's a lot of different estimates that are out there, and I
Uh-huh.
would say many of them are inaccurate, whether you're looking at Redfin or Zillow or Realtor.com. And I encourage you to pull those 3, but let's come and we can just kind of talk it out.
Okay.
So then I'm meeting you at your house.
Yes.
Then from there, I'm really I will say 95% of the appointments, I bring a laptop and I never open it up.
Okay.
That all we're doing is we're just having a conversation.
Yeah.
And it starts with me asking a ton of questions. And I
Great.
know that in this circumstance, I talk all this whole time right here. But in those circumstances, I'm trying to listen as much as possible to find out what's going on. So that might be the place I start. Sam, tell me, what's going on?
We've been looking at moving somewhere closer to the beach. We've been thinking about that for a really long time. Our youngest son just graduated. We're thinking now might be a good time to try to live our dreams.
So you're thinking about downsizing, yes? Is this house too big? Everybody wants to live at the beach.
Everybody
Why?
wants to live at the beach. We like the size of this house. We're able to have the family over and entertain. Ideally, we find something comparable in size,
Okay.
but closer to the water.
So you like to host as well?
We love to host.
Okay, so I think identifying now, okay, what is the motivation? That's really what we're trying to get to. How urgent is this move? Is this a move that's like, yeah, we'd like to do it,
Yeah.
but sometimes that implies what is worst case scenario?
Sure.
So in this case, like, what is worst case scenario?
Yeah, for us, worst case scenario would be we buy in a few years versus now.
Right. But it's sounding like definitely you would like to move down the
Yes,
line.
absolutely.
And you like the size of the house.
I like the size of the house.
So you perhaps don't like this neighborhood in that, I don't mean that you don't like it, but it's done its job.
yeah,
This is maybe a
it's a
family-oriented
family thing. It's
school.
time to
You're
live the dream. I want a deeper tan. I want to surf.
we all do.
Yes, we all do. But really, my motivation for now versus later is it seems like real estate just continues to go up.
Right.
And even though I feel like I'd be selling high, buying high, just historically, I think in 4 years, 5 years, I might look back and regret and think, man, if I would have only bought in 2023, I could have gotten it for the low price of whatever.
I don't know if I can say the low price, but I do feel what you're saying. The beautiful thing about your circumstance is that you're buying and selling in the same market.
Yeah.
So this isn't a circumstance where you're selling in California and you're moving out of state, because then we need to look a little bit at what's the trend and make sure that you're maximizing your dollar out here, because likely what you're going to be purchasing is far less. If the market tanks, let's just say, yes, the value of what you're selling has gone down, but so has what you're buying.
Yeah.
And so that becomes the benefit is, I think, for your circumstance, really what's on the other end of this is a lifestyle change.
Yes.
That's very meaningful to you.
Yes.
So we might as well do that lifestyle change today versus waiting 3 or 4 years, because in the end, maximizing it, if the market's high, it's a lateral move no matter where the market's at.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about the process of buying and selling concurrently.
Okay.
Like, what does that look like? Several different options. Number one is you can sell your property while you're still living in it, and we write contingent offers. There's challenges to that. Contingent meaning we're telling the seller on the property that you're purchasing, hey, I'd love to buy it, but wait for me, I still need to sell something else.
Yeah.
And in a market that is a seller's market, that offer is not as competitive.
Sure.
So we can get that offer accepted, but because the terms of being contingent are not great, you tend to make up for it with a higher price.
That makes sense.
So what I would really recommend, the best financial decision many times is the biggest headache.
Yeah.
And so the biggest headache is you move out of this property, you either get a short-term rental or an Airbnb, but we get you out. We stage the property. The beauty of that is, as it is right now with your family and the property, if I brought you a cash offer for $3 million and they wanted to close in a day,
Yeah.
that sounds great, but you don't have anywhere to go. The money would be great, but it just totally disrupts your family.
Yep.
There's a bunch of pain points in this, especially a sell and a buy.
Yeah.
Let's take them one at a time. So let's get you into a short-term rental. Let's get you into a space that gives you some freedom, that doesn't tie you up, and then we can also leverage the buyer. Then we can fight for top dollar, because otherwise, in this circumstance where we get the contingent offer accepted, we write an offer that says, hey, we want to buy your house, but wait for us, give us some time to sell our house.
Yeah.
And now somehow in some parallel universe, we get it accepted. Now all of a sudden these transactions lean on each other, such that if the buyer of your place comes in and wants a $20,000 price reduction, now we have to have a serious conversation, because if the deal falls apart, do we lose not only the sale, but also your purchase?
The new deal. That makes sense.
But if we're doing the transactions independently of each other, and if you're in a rental and the property is vacant, now if they say $20,000, we can say pound sand.
Yeah.
Or else we're going to go back to the market, because we're not vested that way. Like we're not emotionally, financially invested in that transaction that way.
Yeah.
So looking at that, my opinion, a great time to do this. Arguably, I mean, looking today, it's June. You could sell your property during the height of the market, and we always try to look at the end and look at the demographic of who your buyer is. You said you're in a family neighborhood.
Yeah.
So those people are making the moves during the summer. So let's sell your property now, get it on the market, put us in a situation where there's going to be high demand for your property anyways, and then probably maybe this move that you want to make to the beach, if it's not the last one, it's the second to last one.
Sure.
So then let's go to a short-term rental, and let's be patient, and let's cherry pick, and let's find something that you and your wife absolutely love, and then we can navigate it from there. But I think it's getting into, to step out of the agent, the role play for a moment. It's getting into what your motivation is, but then also being able to implement, like, hey, here's a solution. Because honestly, we'd all love to sell our house and go to the beach, and figuring out how do we get there.
And here's what I really like, just out of the role play, to unpack this a little bit. I believe that professionals owe their clients two things: options and recommendations. And I don't even know if you realized you did this, but you went through some options and then you said, let me recommend something. And it was the short-term rental situation. And then you gave me some reasoning that really resonated with me, which is, I have the opportunity to cherry pick. I think if we were to continue the role play, I would say, hey, well, I've heard that there's nothing on the market, that it's hard to find something. And I think you're answering those in my mind as I truly put on my character. And I was thinking those things. I thought, wow, he's answering questions that I have before I've even expressed those concerns, objections that I have, right? But I do love options and recommendations, and
I think that's a great takeaway. I think that's very well put, because those are real things that people want to know about. Yeah. And I think from the sales side, it's getting to motivation. It's having some knowledge, certainly, and being able to communicate it in a way that people really, that resonates with them, and they feel like confident that, hey, I can, this is a scary step, but I'm confident that this guy knows what he's doing. Yeah. And then being able to proceed with from there.
I agree. Can I ask you another question?
Please.
Shift gears just a little bit.
Yes.
I love the face-to-face. A lot of questions I'm getting from agents in the industry right now is, how do I find that other deal? Now, you mentioned you're working your sphere a lot. Face-to-face meetings is a piece of that. What are you doing to hunt and find? So you're saying you're staying in touch with birthday and anniversary, and all that stuff.
That's just an email that goes out, and the company Studio A manages social media profiles other than my personal Facebook, which I rarely post on. Yeah. So there's connections and touches that are there, and we email out newsletters. But really, what I would say is, client events. I do typically 2 or 3 client events a year,
Okay.
which is I'll host basically a big party. Something like in the fall, we're going to go to Safari Park, which is the wild animal park at the zoo. Have it a kid-friendly event. Have a bunch of people there. It's kind of like a wedding. I mean, I get pulled in a lot of different directions, but it allows me to connect with people.
Yeah.
And then from there, it allows me to people will say, hey, you know what? I've been meaning to connect with you. How about, can we grab a cup of coffee or something like that? I focus on, and so through our database, I keep track of like my top 25 that are either doing the most transactions or have referred the most business.
Okay.
And those are the people that I want to connect with. And I would say then I take that top 25 and I've really narrowed them down to like 10 that are really important people that I want to stay in touch with.
Yeah.
And they refer a lot of business or they're just influential. And I think sometimes that's the feeling is some of them, as an example, one of them is my lender who has referred a fair amount of business. I want to be in front of him. I want to stay connected with him. I want to have a real relationship with him because then he's referring business. I mean, that's more mutually beneficial. But lunches, I get together with people in terms of where they are at and what it looks like for them. With the lender, he hosts a workout on Fridays. Today's actually Friday. I went to that workout, and I try to connect with him as much as possible. I've got I'm not LDS, but I have a great connection of a guy that was a Mormon bishop. That's a very tight-knit community.
Yeah.
I have a great relationship with him. He likes to golf. Quarterly, I play golf with him, and I'm not a big golfer, but it's just a way that we can connect and kind of meeting people where they're at. And then definitely what we always talk about within our team, which is very small, is if we're talking with a client and they've gone dark for a little bit of time or they're feeling uneasy, we always try to circle back to at minimum a conference call, but more importantly, like let's get together. Let's take 20 minutes. Let's get together. Let's have a cup of coffee. Let's meet. We can come to your home. Let's just talk about where you're at.
Yeah.
And I think the process of going into the homes of the broken, so to speak, like walking into people's homes where they're renting an apartment and they're just feeling defeated or I can't get into this market, that being welded together, it solidifies that they're not going to go anywhere else, but also it allows us the ability to say to them, like, look, we can do this. Like, if this is a goal for you, I want you to know this is what we do.
Yeah.
I recognize you're putting a huge amount of trust in me and my team, and we take that trust very seriously. And I want you to know that if you follow our lead, we can make this happen. It's going to be messy.
Yeah.
That's how the real estate transaction
Always.
is. But on the other side of this is you're living with your wife at the beach.
Yeah.
And yes, it's messy moving to a short-term rental, figuring out, putting all your stuff in a pod, making hard decisions and you've probably raised your kids in this property. So there's going to be a lot of emotional attachment to the property.
Yep.
It's going to be messy. But we get through that. Eyes on the prize on the other side is you have a great beach house. Like, it's exactly what you want. Like, let's
realizing the dream at that point.
And I think it's just, I think our society doesn't do a great job of putting in of realizing a vision, of putting a vision down of this is what I actually want. And I think that's the big challenge with most buyers in particular, especially first-time home buyers, is the feeling like it's a dream. It's not a goal. It's
the
too
American
far away.
dream, and it's too hard to get.
Right. Exactly. And so I think being able to build a relationship and then when we have a relationship, being able to say, trust me.
Yeah.
And take that trust seriously and run through walls and walk through fire for our clients and then good things happen.
It's true. I love it. All right. So in closing, this is what I want. I want you to role play with me for just a couple of seconds.
Perfect.
How you close those people. So you're calling people and you're reaching out to your sphere via phone, voice to voice.
Yes.
And you're asking for meetings. How do you close them? What is your close?
It's a great question. And so what I would say is I'm always calling with value for with some reason for value. I'm never calling just to check in or just following up because if I'm just doing that, it's too ambiguous.
Yeah.
Is that me? That is me. And I just
Your
look-
sphere really
oh.
is calling. How about that?
I'm never calling just to like say hi.
Yeah.
Typically,
Sure.
There's a reason for the call, and sometimes that reason is, hey, I was driving in your neighborhood and it made me think of you, and I wanted to see how your daughter is doing. I know that she just graduated high school. This is going in a direction that I see that you're whatever. I know your mom was having some issues or whatever it may be. To just actually, and social media allows us to catch up with, to at least figure out something typically on what's going on with those people. So I might plan out 5 people, 10 people that I want to check in with, and I need to know some little bit of what's going on with them. And sometimes that call is, hey, the anniversary call in terms of not their wedding anniversary, but the anniversary of the house. Hey, you purchased a year ago. Hey, you purchased 2 years ago. Or you sold 2 years ago. Those are great things to check in.
Yeah.
Is to just be able to say, hey, I saw this month that you closed escrow a year ago. How's the last year been? Anything you would have done differently? Would you have kept the house? Are you glad that you purchased? Those kinds of things. And I think that allows us to put our fingers on the pulse of what's actually happening with people. As a very simple example, I represented a buyer who purchased an investment property now like 6 years ago. And I asked him 3 months after, I was like, how was it? What did you think? And he said, I wouldn't have done it again. And I was like, oh, that's valuable. And so then a year later checked in and he said, is still bad. It's not as bad as I said before, but it's a bad investment. And then a year later, and he's like, well, it's okay. And of course now, because interest rates, or excuse me, because rents have gone up and the value has gone up, I called him a couple months ago and he said, best investment I ever made. And of course, like it's just because, and being connected to it allows me to know kind of where he's at. And now that I've got a real relationship with him, I can say something to the effect of, well, now you've got a lot of gains. I know you've got some cash flow. We could do an exchange. You could take that and you could take some money off the table. Hey, if he starts talking about he's nervous about the market. Hey, you've got 300,000 in gains. How about take 100,000 off? We can roll the 200,000 in a 1031 exchange or something like that. You're going to have to pay tax on the 100,000 in terms of gains. Yeah. I'm not actually doing your
You're not closing my clothes.
your role play, but I do think that. Number one, I need to call you for a reason, and then I need to have a goal of why is it I'm calling you. And sometimes the call is actually just a check-in, but I don't want to phrase it in like, at least in my world, if Juan called me and was like, hey, Steve, just checking in, it'd be a little bit of an awkward conversation.
That's awkward.
Yeah, I'd be like, well, thanks. But if he's calling to say, hey, I know the real estate market has changed. Are you doing okay? Same actual goal, very different message.
And very different conversation.
Very different conversation because it's poignant, and so I think that we can recognize that with everyone. My goodness, it's summertime, people are graduating high school. Call your clients and say, hey, I know your daughter just graduated high school. Congratulations. Yeah. Hey, seriously, how are you doing with that? I'm sure it's a little bittersweet. Yeah. And finding out exactly where things are at, I think is valuable.
Oh, I love that. Steve, thank you for giving up the host chair, sitting in the guest chair.
This was fun.
It was fun. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and skill with everybody listening. So thanks. I hope you do this again soon.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you. And joining us. I don't know if I'm supposed to end it or if Sam's supposed to end it. This is what happens when we're all out of sync.
Cats and dogs living together.
But thank you for being here. We hope to see you again soon here on Contingent on You Listening.